So we had briefly wrote some of this content down. We said we were going to return to it, and we never did. So that's my mistake. My mistake, your fault. Okay? That's another thing you can learn, Mr. Wagner. Sometimes it's our mistake, but it's still their fault. Yeah. You buy that?
I like that.
See that? Yeah, yeah.
Makes it easy for us.
It does. We just passed the buck then. Okay, so what do we see on the left? We got amylase. That comes from a specific source of course, your salivary glands, which I'm looking at. Okay, you got your goldfish and then your pretzels. Okay. Did you know them goldfish come in different colors?
Yeah, flavors.
Is it colors or flavors?
Colors and flavors.
Colors and flavors.
Oh, yeah. But the colored ones, like the rainbow ones, they all taste.
They're not very good?
So there's no, it's just like regular goldfish. They just don't taste. It's just different color, not different taste.
But you can also get pizza goldfish and cupcake goldfish and
Yeah, it's more.
So where do you stop with flavors?
you know,
You just keep going. You just keep going.
more money.
See, it is, but I can put this into a hunting term now because, see, now we get to make fun of Mr. Wagner now. Because you're talking about all these different flavors of goldfish. Well, to me, that's kind of like he's out in pheasant hunting and there's 3 or 4 roosters that pop up. Okay, which one am I going to pick? Now they're all gone. Can't. You can shoot at all 4. What happens if he hits all 4? That's illegal. How many of you knew that? Unless you have someone else along with you.
You can hold. I think now you don't have to have a plug-in, but anyway, you can hold the shotgun shell and throw it in.
Okay, but is the limit still 3 though?
Oh, never mind. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So 12 gauge, 20 gauge.
12 gauge, yeah. The most that varies, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, we remember from physical science, don't put that buttstock away from your shoulder or else it's going to hurt. You only make that mistake once.
That's true.
Okay. So that's what comes to mind when you're talking about all these different goldfish flavors is where do you stop with them? All of a sudden you have all them to pick from, and then maybe it's from experience where you finally will go ahead and maybe stick to a flavor. Then you might not like any of them, okay? But regardless, if you are breaking down carbohydrates, we see the idea of that amylase is produced in, of course, your salivary glands, which, trick question, okay? How many total salivary glands do you have? I still don't have a right answer. Still don't have a right answer. Still don't have a right answer. Nope. Say that again. Set of 3 glands. So if they come in a set, that must mean you have what? Which means if there's 3 parts and there's 3 sets, how many total is that? A left and a right, a left and a right, and a left and a right. That's 6 of them. See, I told you it was a trick question. That was me just being mean, perhaps. So with that, you have that amylase that breaks down your, from your salivary glands, that's going to break down your carbohydrates. But that's not your only source. What else would possibly be doing that? Where else do you have a source of this amylase that's not in your salivary glands? And we have talked about it. Yeah, because we also have amylase, but what is the source of that? You said, yeah, your pancreas. The reason that we want to write it like this is because now, if we're getting past this and we have the lipids and fats, we've got pizza crunchers. Let's just go with the presumption that they are deep fat fried. Wouldn't that make it better? Everything fried is better. Yeah. If you go to any state fairs or Sioux Empire Fair, what do you have to walk away from? Or not walk away from. What do you have to take that I got to have this every time we go to a function like that? Funnel cake. Okay, I agree. I didn't have one this year. What was I thinking? I said I'd rather have the SDSU ice cream.
Or the corn dogs.
Footlongs? Okay. But they're probably not 12 inches, though. Are they?
Oh, I don't get the, I get the small.
Yeah, I don't know if they're two. Okay, so we hear funnel cake, footlong, corn dogs, cheese curds.
Lemonade.
That's just too healthy. Skip that.
No, we're gonna eat it.
And what did you say? Oh, am I hearing things? Oh,
This smells good.
just didn't want to share. Okay, fair enough. So, if it's deep fat fried, whether it's your funnel cake, your corn dog, and refresh my memory, cheese curds. Okay. In my estimation, probably cheese curds would be the best example of that, because how are you going to break those down? Okay, we need an enzyme. Okay, is that the most common way? You're not wrong, but there's a better enzyme. You got the correct page number. So what are you looking at? Okay, but that's what Johnny came up with. There's another source for breaking down fats that's not the pancreas. Like I said, you're not wrong. It's not the primary one to use. Oh, G. It starts with a G. So now, what's in the gallbladder? Okay, so bile is your main enzyme. Now, why do you have to be careful with where it comes from? Because I know on your vocab quiz, I don't know which one it said, the definition was this enzyme is, it didn't say made in the gallbladder, but it said secreted from the gallbladder. Specifically speaking, why is that wrong? Okay, it's probably what you two said together. What was that? It secretes from the liver. And when you talk about a secretion, that means it has to come from the gland that produced it. So when we're talking about bile, you correctly said, what's secreting the bile? The liver, okay? But it's just stored in the gallbladder, okay? So we're going to put liver here. And that is your main source for breaking down fats. It comes from your liver, but just stored in your gallbladder. Then, what's another source for breaking down fats? Okay? But we want to be a little more specific. Of course, pancreas. So, one thing to take away from this is, unfortunately, we don't know why, but probably because the pancreas has so many vital functions. To me, luckily, this other large organ, you can have hepatic cancer too, I think, correct? Yeah, but I don't think it's quite as common as pancreatic cancer. But for some reason, this type of cancer, it just seems to erode and eat away at people faster than anything else. It's probably because it just has so many effects on everything that they have to metabolize, whether it's fats, whether it's sugars, or anything to that effect. Okay, then one of the last things we wanted to get to with these sugars and carbohydrates is now I'm going to change colors here, and what does that mean to you? If you see insulin and or glucagon. So which one's which? Do they have the same function? No, they do not. Okay? So where do these originate then? Still in the pancreas, okay? So we'll just do this. We'll put pancreas for both of them. Okay? Then what are their corresponding functions then? One raises, one lowers. Which one's which? Blood sugar levels. What's going to allow that to go down? Insulin. Okay? So then, in this case, this, we'll just say, lowers blood sugar levels. So then the corresponding function of this would be raises blood sugar levels. Now, so does that occur in the pancreas? No, it does not. This hormone actually gets sent through the bloodstream to the organ we left off with yesterday, which was what? The liver. And the liver will help metabolize these according to the function of which one is being sent, because these are actually made by, there's alpha and beta cells. I think these are beta cells. I think those are alpha cells that produce those. Okay, so one of the things that can happen is if in certain cases you may have to give what's called a beta blocker or an alpha blocker. For some reason or another. If you give a beta blocker to someone, it's going to block the receptor sites, and then this is not going to have its corresponding function because it's blocking the beta cells from doing their corresponding functions. Okay, so that was a lot of content in a short amount of time. We'll wrap this up with just a short diagram at the end, and then that will be it for today. Okay, so this is about where we left off with yesterday. And then also for tomorrow, work on, what page number is that, Mr. Wagner?
687.
687 is that clinical applications. I see a lot of you had worked on your notes that you would take over that. And if you haven't started that yet, probably we're really not so concerned about the percentages on there, but mainly these three aspects. The first one, I think, was diverticulitis. The second disorder is, it's not Crohn's disease, that's the third one, colitis. Okay, we want you to focus in on those three disorders. Diverticulitis, colitis, and then Crohn's disease. Okay, so this is where we just left off with this diagram. Okay. The reason that this says under the liver is the pancreas is sending this information to the liver for sugars to be either metabolized or burned up. When we say metabolize, maybe you need to lower your blood sugar levels by producing glycogen, and the liver will do that. Okay? Or maybe your blood sugar levels are too low, your liver is going to start breaking that glycogen and starting to raise your blood sugar levels. Okay. So regardless, we need this, and we talked about, this is where we left off with yesterday, right? And for this purpose, The sense that we made from this is we say this is the most vital of all the liver functions. And it's not that these aren't important, they are, but the correlation that we made is how many human body systems are there? There are 11. And it's like we said, it's not that the circulatory system is more important than the respiratory or the digestive or the reproductive or endocrine system, but none of them can work without what? The nervous system. So in this case, the reason that we say this one is so important is because this is what allows these two to happen. Because protein metabolism means you're making proteins or breaking them down in order for the assorted functions that you're looking at, clotting factors, or just breaking down cellular waste products, which is, of course, urea. Converts it to uric acid, then you can get rid of it. Okay, so this is where we begin. Wrap this up with the liver today. Holy cow, it's 10:45 already. And when we're looking at some of these toxic substances, okay, we're guilty of that up here. I'm not going to say in both cases. We'll just say one of them, okay? Because what do you suppose we both drink in the morning? Yeah. So this guy right here, okay, that's toxic to the body. So what the liver does is makes that substance water soluble, just like we see here, okay? This is not water soluble, but uric acid is. So therefore, the liver converts that to a water soluble product that then can be removed from the body. And of course, alcohol is toxic to the body as well. But one of the things the liver does is it will take that alcohol and convert it to something. Anyway, you know? It's actually a reverse process, I think, of fermentation. Because what you do, if you are brewing alcohol, you are boiling the sugars out of that, and then the sugars ferment to alcohol. Then, in the opposite direction, what happens, your liver will metabolize this, change the alcohol back to sugars. Then we store them on the body. And of course, if it's taken into excess, then that is more of a problem for, unfortunately, some people more than others. So. All right. Is that the last slide for the liver? Small intestine next? Okay. So then, when we look at these, does anyone possibly know what some of them function? There's no way that you would know what those functions are, but vitamin A is probably the one that you would know the most. Has to deal with what sense, do you think? Carrots is always going to be your go-to source for this. Yeah, your eyesight. I think there's a protein called rhodopsin that you actually receive. It's a type of vitamin A, and then that helps you with your vision. Okay. How many of you are maybe reading something at home, and someone says, "Do you want the light on? Because it's going to hurt your eyes." Well, it's not that it's going to hurt your eyes. You're just having to work harder. It's not that you're going to go blind or anything like that. They're just maybe working a little harder, trying to focus in on what you're trying to read. But vitamin A from carrots is a good source for that functions with that rhodopsin to be able to keep your good sight. Then 2, 3. Okay, so we're we'll wrap this up today then. Like on your vocabulary evaluations, how many of you notice I wouldn't think to do that. Put a D, a J, and an I. Because that is the order. And these students did that, and I thought, are they putting the selections on the side? Because I'm looking and I'm scratching my head and said, I just wanted to remember the order. Okay? The first section, as you can see, the duodenum. The second section, the jejunum. Jejunum. I've been mispronouncing it for years. So is it duodenum or duodenum?
Duodenum.
It is duodenum. Okay. So we're batting 1 for 2. So, all right. Jejunum. Did I get that right? Jejunum. Ah, good Lord. It's going to be a while before I get that. Which one of these will have a concentration of acid? And not that there's a lot in there, but there's going to be some hydrochloric acid in there. But that tap has been shut off by a hormonal action in the stomach. What hormone does that? It's a hard one to say. Mm-hmm. Colis something. Cholestacinin. So if that shuts the tap off, what's the hormone that turns the tap on? Yeah, gastin or gastrin, because I think there's actually an R in there. And why is it that you do not, we said, we'll stipulate there's some acid in here, but why is that a problem if you have a large concentration of acid in your small intestine? Yeah, they don't have mucous cells that actually produce that mucus that creates that buffer, or else it's going to actually break down itself and start eating holes in your intestine. So yeah, there's probably a little bit of acid in there, but that not a large amount of acid. And then, how would you know, okay, what is the first portion of your large intestine called? And how do you know it's the cecum? You're right. From the vocabulary, that's right. Because the third portion of your small intestine is the ileum, and then the first portion of the large intestine, we said it was the cecum. Then there's a valve that opens and closes. The ileocecal valve, and that's why it gets its name. Okay, now, some people, I know in that clinical application it talks about colon cancer. We're not going to be discussing that at all. But if someone is diagnosed with a large amount of cancer in their bowels, we say that that's going to be their parts of their intestine. To surgically correct that, one of two things might happen is there's structures called polyps that can show up in a large intestine. If it's a word I'm looking for, if it's a drastic measure, a doctor might choose, do you suppose you need all of that large intestine? No, they can actually remove parts of your large intestine. You're going to need some of that, of course. You still need to be able to pass waste products. And that's going to be, again, one of these aspects that some of you future nurses are possibly going to be doctors. Or what do we leave off with? We see some nurses out there, and maybe you don't know yet. Okay, those are some of the things that you may deal with in the hospital, whether it's the emergency room, the operating room, or even with taking care of patients in a day-to-day process. Okay, here we see again your ileum, the third portion of the small intestine, and that ileocecal valve. actually, we will stop there for today. And then I just said I was going to put one other small drawing up on the board, and then that will be it for today. Promise. Crossing my fingers. So if I'm wrong, then I said, well, doesn't that get you out of a promise if you cross your fingers? Is that how that works? Okay. That's fine. I'll keep them crossed then. Okay. We'll finish that carbohydrate metabolism tomorrow, but one of the things that we wanted to illustrate here, okay, is as follows. And I know we drew this up on the board at some point, okay? Looks like links in a chain, okay? And if you don't get it this time around, this will come full circle again in the endocrine system, because those are hormones, and insulin and glucagon, no surprise, are hormones. So if we draw something like this, okay, a large complex compound of carbohydrates, okay, so each individual one of these, what would you guess these are? Individual what units? Glucose units, okay? Well, if your blood sugar level is going down, okay, what do you suppose happens if you break this chain? This is stored very easily in the liver, okay? So this is what large carbohydrate would you guess? Starch, which is a form of glycogen, okay? So how is this going to get broke apart? It's a hormone that's going to cause the liver to break this down. Okay, so think of it this way. What happens if this large carbohydrate gets broken apart? Now you have all these individual units floating around. Is that going to raise or lower the levels of glucose? It's going to raise it. So what hormone does that? Glucagon. So then in the opposite fashion, if our blood sugar levels are getting too high, one of two things will happen. Insulin then gets secreted and changes this back to a type of carbohydrate that can be stored. Or it's going to cause the intake of glucose inside of your cells to be burned. It's going to be one of those two functions. Okay. Of course, there's a whole lot of information you can go out with this. So in your experiences, is there anything that you could want or possibly add to this? Or
No, I think that's a good way of just describing the system very simply.
okay. And we try to keep things simple around here, at least as much as possible. So tomorrow we'll go over again your, we'll call special topics. Mr. Wagner will go ahead and take care of that, because we have discussed information that we want you to go over. So we'll just ask for your individual input. Then I would be led to believe that the diagram that we spent with, it's got your liver on it, it's got your gallbladder on it, it's got your pancreas on it, and it's got your small intestine on it. But what portion of the small intestine must that be if your pancreas is releasing or secreting substances into it? Is it the ileum, the jejunum? Did I get it right? Jejunum, or is it the duodenum? Yeah, it's actually the duodenum, be the first portion. Okay, so that's what we'll pick up with tomorrow. So we will catch up to you next time.